Having seen Feliz Navidad.
Okay, the mics are live now on the stream. Thank you.
Thank you.
Call this meeting to order. Let me go back to the meeting. Need a roll call, please?
Mayor Larry Milton.
Here.
City Administrator Stan Dobbins.
Here.
Alderman Bill Skanes.
Here.
Alderman Jamie Whitus.
Here.
Brian Casaboom.
Here.
Melissa Sill.
Here.
Kyle David.
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Agenda item number 1, we'll have a presentation by Jan.
First thing on the agenda today is our staff report for.
Jan, I'm sorry, would you pull your mic closer?
Okay, sorry about that. It's the minutes from the last meeting. Get approval on that if we could, please.
So moved, Mayor. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Ayes have it. Number 2, discussion of Article 15.
Yeah, Mayor, what we're doing today, we're bringing to the committee just some simple updates on Article 15. It has to do with work period, holiday pay, and things like that. The one thing that, as a point of order on this is, we have various schedules with respect to how employees work and how their overtime is calculated. Like the fire department, anything over 212 hours over a 28-day period counts as overtime. So based on that, based on their 24 on, 48 off, their schedule, it's kind of a convoluted, complicated process. You have to look at it over a 3-year period. But effectively, they get 156 hours of built-in overtime into their work schedules. And that's irrespective of whether or not there's a holiday in there and things like that. So that's fairly straightforward. But what we experienced recently with the Thanksgiving holiday on the police department, their overtime is based on an 80-hour work schedule. That's a 2-week schedule. So what happened in a situation, and it's kind of an anomaly, but it's something that we'd like to address, and that is the 2 days, holiday pay does not count in the calculation of overtime for the city of Branson for employees. So in that respect, for police officers who had Thursday and Friday off for Thanksgiving, the following week, that time off impacted their ability to get overtime. We had one employee in particular had somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 hours of overtime that following week. Wow. Really busting it. But we had to reduce it by 16 full hours, which really hits them in the pocketbook at that point. So that's part of what we're wanting to do in this fix, if you will, for Article 15. The other thing that we want to do is, whenever employees work outside of their shift, they're assigned to work outside of their shift, like whenever police officers work board meetings, or if they work parade control or protest control, things like that. And not only just officers, but any employee, like public works and utilities folks. We'd like for those extra hours where they are assigned to work, that be also allowed to be counted as overtime as well. That's what we do for police officers. We just kind of like to make that uniform through all the employees in the city. And then another part to what we want to do with respect to cleaning up this particular policy has to do with what we had approved earlier this year when we allowed for Juneteenth or June 19th to be a holiday. That's going to be an insertion into our holiday schedule. And then the last part, when it comes to holiday pay, we put in a situation, what we've got built in right now is whenever you roll over into a new year, you have to use your holiday pay prior to April 1st. If you don't use it or whatever, you lose it, that kind of thing. And sometimes folks get so bound up in their schedules, like with the fire department in particular, whenever you're rolling over into a new year, it gets difficult to schedule that time off. If you don't have the presence of mind to ask for payment of it, you lose it. So our recommendation here today is let's get rid of the lose it part of it. And if you don't use it by April 1st, you just get paid out for it and leave it at that. And that's the update that we have for Article 15.
Is that an automatic payout?
I would recommend that it be an automatic payout. If
They wouldn't have to request it, I guess that's what I'm saying.
Right.
People do get caught up in their schedule.
And that's one of those, we'll have to work out some of the logistics around it and see how it's going to work from a functional perspective. We'll have to get with payroll and make sure that some of these things just work out appropriately.
Jen, the issues you just brought up are part of the global payroll question in our budgeting and some of our decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Would you support a recommendation that let's address all these after we have received a staffing study? So that would accomplish a couple things. One is we'll get some professional advice, see how comparative we are with the marketplace, and also see what budget impact this will have.
Sure.
So instead of piecemealing, let's change the overtime, let's do
Okay.
this, let's do that.
Yeah, we can, whatever the committee's flavor is, that's, the main thing is I just wanted to kind of get this on everybody's radar because the police overtime, that's kind of a big deal.
Sure it
whenever
is.
somebody gets affected that way.
Have we ordered the staffing study?
Not yet. We're still doing a search on that,
Okay.
trying to do an
Okay.
RFP for that.
Can I sneak in something that we talked about last night? Will that be rolled into this as well? Gives us an opening to discuss. It's a much broader scope. Remember, you came to us with
Yes.
an issue last night.
The issue last night had to do with an interim piece with respect to just blowing out the caps so that employees who have topped out currently for 2021 and who will top out in 2022 would have the opportunity to get a pay raise. That's all last night really was effectively about. But what we would be doing with the staffing study and the compensation study is we'd be looking at that to try to fix the whole thing.
Right.
So we wouldn't necessarily need what we had last night.
I'm not trying to fudge on this, but part of the discussion was it wasn't put on our agenda today, but it seems to be part and parcel, to me, tied into Article,
15.
just a second, the glasses go back on, Article 15. Sure. I just didn't know whether we had time to deal with that, because it seems like it's under all that.
Yeah, it is.
The heading.
In many respects, because, like I said, we've got a couple of dispatchers, we've got several people across the organization, we've got directors who have topped out in their pay scales.
Right.
And, and for 2022, won't see any kind of increase other than whatever the stipend will pay out would be in next November or whenever it would be.
Yeah, until we get the staffing study.
Right.
I think that'll provide us, instead of just flying in the dark and piecemealing it, I think a comprehensive plan after we get this information back, I would strongly encourage that.
Okay.
Can I just ask a couple questions? Sure. Okay, first with the police officers, you said that is not usual for that situation to occur when someone works that much overtime and then is not paid out for it?
Right. It's not common, but it happens from time to time. It's just something that we'd like to see avoided.
Okay. I think that's something we need to stay aware of because if I work 35 hours overtime in 1 week, I would want paid out for that too. I mean, that's a lot of additional time. Also, so on the special events, we're talking any sort of special event that's held in the city. So
A planned special event. It's not like a snow day where they already get overtime and things like that. It would be for parades, like Public Works folks that have to get up on a Sunday morning or whatever
Yeah.
and go out there,
Okay.
that kind of thing.
So what I would encourage the board to consider then, in something like that, is if we are paying a police officer additional hours to be working a private event, that maybe we consider looking at what we're charging for special events for something like that. Just because, I mean, that could be a considerable amount of money that taxpayers are then paying for that. And I think, unless we've changed it recently, we're looking at $110 or so for a special event permit. Does anyone, I'm sorry, Jamie, do you know?
It depends on the size of the event.
The fee for the, okay.
It go up to $500, I believe, yeah.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, and I don't know if that's something that we track, or maybe it's something that we should start tracking, but if we have police officers and public works employees that are working significant hours over the weekend for that, then maybe we should just look at maybe charging an hourly rate or something to recoup some of those costs.
And then that opens up the other topic that goes alongside that, and that is when we have our city wants to encourage special events. And Jamie and I have played with just some real rough numbers, but when we look at what the tax generated is from a special event, I think one example we used was, depending how many people, I mean, it would bring in an extra $50,000 of tax revenue from that event. And so there's two schools of thought. Mine is, instead of trying to discourage event planners because of the event fee, let's not try to get that extra $100, $200, $300 from them. Let's encourage more event planners to come in so we can have more of those $50,000 revenue tax events, if you will. So,
Well, and if that's true, and we've done the research and we know that that's what's happening, I mean, then that is certainly, I mean, that's great, right? We're more than recouping our costs, but
Right.
I just want to make sure that we're not.
yeah, and I was looking at what the CVB was providing, just to use some rough numbers. They provide us with how much revenue, or excuse me, how much a visitor spends while they're in Branson, or how much a family spends. And so when we take those numbers and we say, okay, here's an event that's gonna bring in this many 5,000 people, if those 5,000 individuals or families paid $1,000 per vacation, how much tax would that generate? So I think that's worthy. Jimmy, I'd like to follow up on maybe refining maybe some of those numbers. And there is no exact, but I would feel comfortable using what the CVB says. So many people, so much spend per family for each day. I mean, they have that information. So if we looked at a permit and said, okay, they're anticipating 5,000 people at this event, Chamber says they're spending X number of dollars per person, that would generate X number of dollar of tax. Yeah, okay, thank you.
And I think those were the items I just thought maybe need to
bet.
be addressed before, and then everything else could be included in the staffing study.
Yeah,
One other item on the staffing study, and this is to help Jeff, and I know he's sitting there thinking about it. When we talk about the cap on our salaries, it actually is detrimental to him trying to recruit individuals from other departments, because we bring them on board. They have a certain expertise they bring with them, and we put them into a position in our salary structure where they'll top out in 2 to 3 years. They have no incentive to come and stay here if their agency doesn't have that cap. So it hurts him in the recruiting field from trying to get people here from other agencies. So we need to include that in that staffing study too.
yeah, that's very important, yeah. So I make, can I make a motion as a chairman? I know I can't as the mayor. Make a motion, or,
I'll help you.
okay, thank you.
I'd make a motion that we move to postpone this item until the completion of the staffing study and bring it to be brought forward at that time.
Okay.
Do we need to go ahead and approve the Juneteenth, though?
Well, I think the city administrator and the mayor currently have the latitude to declare holidays.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's already in effect.
Yeah.
Thought we
Right, yeah.
did.
It's part of, well, you got to have a second.
Yeah,
I'll second
so-
that so we
okay.
can have discussion. What we talked about last night as well, is that going to be rolled into this particular segment for
Yes, it
discussion? Okay.
Any other comments from the board, committee? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Item number 3, discussion of Article 17.
Yes. Mayor, I realize that a lot of the commentary and the input that you would have would revolve around the results of a staffing study and things like that. I get that. But the thing that we wanted to bring forward today had to do with interim steps that would help save the city time and money and things like that. And that's part of the issue that we wanted to do with Article 17, which otherwise would be leaves of absence and such like that, whereby, you know, we are, the recommendation would be to make some fairly wholesale changes to our sick leave and vacation policy. But I'm going to leave that alone for this because we're coming up on our snow season, if you will, and we wanted to be able to have the emergency leave policy in place, and that's the part of this that would be able to facilitate that. This would be, again, an interim step that we would come back and fix for the sick leave and things like that at a later date. But it would give us the mechanism to be able to get out in front of different things with respect to, you know, like what happens if we have a big snowstorm and employees have to address it. It addresses those issues right away that really won't have a long-term effect, and we really don't know if it's going to hit this year or not, that kind of thing.
You want to walk us through that then?
Absolutely. So, you know, the one thing that we had talked about earlier on the last time that we had talked about the emergency leave and things like that. Well, let's back up at the very first there on elaborating better on bereavement leave. We had talked about that in our last meeting on Article 17, and the committee was in full agreement on that to elaborate better, you know, who could take off and how many hours one could take off with respect for bereavement, because we've got situations where, you know, somebody falls outside of the realm of a parent or a grandparent or somebody like that, but there was significant input by that person in the employee being raised or reared, if you will, things like that, and allowing some time for employees to be able to grieve and then spread that out over time. Personally, I had an aunt who passed away several years ago, and she died on one day, and her funeral wasn't for 3 weeks. You know, it was just planned that way. So it was, you know, had it been under our current rules, I wouldn't have been able to technically take the bereavement leave like that. So we're setting it up so that, you know, with the change in standards and how folks address bereavement, we can fully address what most employees will run into. That's kind of what we're looking at with that. The emergency leave, that has to do with effectively allocating those people that that are required to come in. We would essentially give those folks a 5% pay bump for their time worked during that time, simply because those other people who couldn't work, they're going to have to stay at home and maybe flex their time or do something else at a later date, or the department head may have to allow for emergency leave to allow that person to get paid, simply because we had a snowstorm or something like that. But then the third situation has to do with employees who can fully just work from home. You know, so there seems to be no sense in giving somebody who could otherwise work from home any other incentive just to let them work from home, and establishing the standards around that. So that's what that particular element has.
Let me ask you questions.
Sure thing.
I may be totally off base, but the issue that we had to deal with before, and we may have in the future, of the COVID intrusion into our community and employees, is the emergency leave part of that, or am I sort of
Yes,
off
sir.
base on that?
Yeah, because part of that is also going to allow the city administrator to authorize time off for employees to be able to work from home or do whatever they need to do.
It wouldn't count against their, I'm just going to use the old term, sick or annual leave.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Thank you.
The next one has to do with the USERRA, the military leave policy. Our current policy is fairly stunted in its, in the depth and breadth of how we address people on military leave. There's a lot of nuances to it that we just aren't incorporating into it, and this is more of an educational piece that allows for employees to understand part of their rights under USERRA, so that, you know, whenever they come back to work, they're entitled to certain privileges simply because, you know, they've been off serving the country in one form, fashion or another. And so we've elaborated on that, pulled directly from statutes and such like that, administrative policies at the federal level, so that everything is aligned and people understand how they're going to be treated in the event that they have to be gone from anywhere from a weekend warrior to you get deployed for 6 months in Afghanistan or something like that. So just want to lay that out and make sure that everybody understands what's there and available to them. And then, like I said, the last piece kind of ties in with the emergency leave, having to do with emergency conditions, establishing those 3 levels of employees, those that have to be to work, that have to do their job on a regular basis. That's going to be your police officers, firefighters, your utility workers and things like that. And then you would have other employees like your custodians that have to work at a location, but it's not imminent that they have to get their job done today. So we develop the conditions around that allows them to be able to get paid and to be able to allow the director some flexibility in that respect. And that's the update on this Article 17.
A comment question here. This is extremely complex. Walk me through the process of Larry and I being an employee, he a policeman and I a fireman, in dealing with this, and how a payroll check is cut and these items are communicated from the employee to the supervisor to personnel or to Jamie's office. Can you walk me through that process? Because that seems to be, I remember turning in a timesheet for the feds that I had to clock my time on 15-minute increments across several titles of federal programs: dislocated worker, formula, discretionary, governor's discretionary, youth discretionary, to be adult, Title IV, YCCFE, all those programs, and it was extremely complex.
It is. You know, especially for our firefighters, when you throw in the additional element of income averaging over pay periods with respect to, you know, they want effectively similar paychecks from one pay period to the next pay period, and you kind of average that out. That becomes a huge challenge. You know, in our first negotiations with the IAFF, that was one of the things I said, you know, if you come to me and ask me, how much do I make on an hourly basis? I can't really tell you because of that income averaging. I'd have to look at all your hours and all those different things. And fortunately, our payroll system has the ability to calculate those things. Because if I had to do it by hand, that would be a tough chore. But when you know, a lot of times employees, they understand what their schedules are. They've gone through it multiple times. Effectively, what we do is we log our time on timesheets. We submit it for payroll. They enter that information. then they verify that information through another report, and then we sign off on it at that point. So it's fairly straightforward in what we do. It's a bit antiquated in how it works. I think the finance director would like to see that, updated at some point, and especially with our timekeeping system, which is, effectively what we're talking about here is it's very labor intensive in doing this process this way. But it works, but it takes time.
With these such modifications, and I'm going to try to be clear here, I know that sometimes in mine, I wasn't allowed to work over 40 hours per week as a federal or state employee, or they would send you home if you already worked your 40 hours. There's no overtime if you weren't in management at the time. So Larry works 67, 68 hours one week because there are other people at off. Is that caught up in that immediate next paycheck, or may it also be delayed for the second paycheck to catch up? Because it seems to be a lot of paperwork and decisions have to be made between his supervisor, the city manager, and the fiscal director.
Yeah, we track that information with respect to the time worked.
Is that done on a daily basis?
Well, it's done on a pay period basis,
Okay,
if
I
you
got
will.
you.
Because, each, like I said, the pay periods, the pay periods are what they are. They're every 2 weeks, but how you calculate overtime is going to go into effect as well. Like I said earlier, police officers is over an 80-hour pay period versus 40 hours for most everybody else. That being said, when it comes to that kind of thing, the overtime is attributed to that pay period. It can either be in just straight time, or it is with an addition of overtime and or compensatory time, so that an employee would then get the equivalent of time and a half. So if I work, or if the mayor were to work an hour of overtime, then he would be able to take an hour and a half off some other time, if he chose to do it that way. And that's just the nuances.
I just remember how complex it used to be, and it sort of boggles my mind still how you guys keep up with it.
Well,
Kudos to you for doing it.
computers help a lot, but we could do better on our computer side too. It's got some limitations to it that, our payroll person does a phenomenal job in making sure that everything is done on
So
time.
my question goes back to, is that captured during the immediate time frame that Larry worked, 86 hours? And on the end of that pay period, he's caught up on his recognition of compensatory time or whatever else, or is that deferred over to the next time frame in order to catch up?
First, it's recorded in that pay period.
In that pay period.
In that 80-hour pay period. The thing that you need to remember is the employee is allowed the choice, because we can't make them work comp time. They have the option to work overtime if that's what they want, but they're given the option, if they want, and some do, to utilize comp time. If we can, within that 28-day pay period, within that 80, it's really a 28-day pay period, but
Okay.
but within that 80 hours, we can flex, we call it flex time. Say, hey, guess what, we've got 8 people on tomorrow. You want to just take some time off tomorrow? And they say, hey, that sounds great. Or they come to us and ask us that, as long as it's within that 80 hours because of FLSA rules. Other than that, it really is the departments themselves track their own personnel's time. They input their personnel time into the computer system, and then it gets double-checked through the HR department, through the finance department, and then it's returned back, and we sign off on it.
Okay, thank you, Stan.
Just out of curiosity, what is that time tracked on? Is it used on the Chronos system? Is that what the city uses?
And Naviline is what we use.
Okay. Is that efficient?
It's probably,
Daniel?
Jamie, yeah, would you come up? Thank you.
It's very antiquated, and the time tracking is done manually on paper. So it's kind of embarrassing to say, but it is still. So the employees, they fill out their time They turn that paper, their timesheet, into their supervisor. Their supervisor checks it, signs off on it, goes to the director. The admin of that department enters their time into the payroll for Navalon. And then what happens is Marsha, our payroll accountant, she has to come in on the backside and then process payroll. So in terms of like overtime, we have codes set up for that. For the fire department, codes set up for that. So when those change, we go in on the backside for the codes and we revise the codes to make that work. So it's very antiquated, and I love that you mentioned Chronos because in some of my past jobs, we've used it. We would love to have a timekeeping system, and I think it would benefit us in accuracy, and I think it would benefit us in time for our employees and our administrative assistants, so.
Well, that would have been my follow-up is how efficient are we on that? Could we save a lot of time if we got away from the paper?
Oh, my goodness. I believe we could. One of the things that I would love to see happen, and we're looking at like some of the ARPA funds that are out there to see if we can make that work because it's IT generated. So a whole ERP system for the entire city. And what that means is basically your operating software, every module that you have is in one big package and it all works together and it all talks together. And in that is your time tracking system, your applicant tracking, your operational software, your GIS maps, all of that comes into one package, one software. One, it saves you money of having to have this software and this software and this software. And so, but the best thing about it is that they all talk to each other and they all work together. And it might be a pipe dream, but in reality, that would be awesome for it all to work together and get rid of the antiquated system. Timekeeping is very, very important to the city. So sure, Chronos, I've used it before and we really like it. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
So that would really be something, Jimmy, we'd look at the cost of the software versus how much time we're saving, right? And in this day and age, going automated is the way of the world. So, Jan, let me ask you for your guidance.
Sure.
Out of these 4 items that we're discussing, are there items on here out of these 4 that we would be better served waiting to make a decision when we get our staffing study and have some real results to look at?
I don't believe these would be affected by the staffing study.
Okay. Well, okay, because part of that staffing study, I'm assuming he's going to look at, for example, whether it's police or fire or any department, if we're by design paying the time and a half and overtime for this and these events, would we be better off hiring another full-time employee? Would that cost the city less than paying several overtime?
Right, right. And again, you know, based on this particular article, you know, I was avoiding those specific things that addressed the overtime kinds of issues outside of you know, the emergency leave and things like that. Because currently what we do is if you work a snow day or something like that, you're allowed an additional day off if City Hall is closed. So that then is an additional expense to the city. We were just trying to clean that up a little bit because, you know, at the end of the day, we're differentiating between exempt and non-exempt employees. If somebody has to work from home and they're exempt, then they get another day off. That just kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense in that respect. So again, we're just trying to clean up some of the little nuanced things that wouldn't necessarily be, the more functional things that wouldn't be affected by any kind of staffing study to see what our workloads are, things like that.
When would this go into effect? January 1st?
Well, I'd have to take it to the board and get it approved by the board, so probably 1st of February.
Do all of our exempt employees have the ability to work from home? They all have laptops and docking stations?
After COVID, after that,
To
most,
my knowledge, every single exempt employee, yes. To my knowledge. If there's an outlier, I don't know of one.
How would you handle then if someone forgot to bring their laptop home?
Their supervisor needs to make sure they're responsible and takes their equipment with them, or they'd have to travel in to get it. I mean, we can't be responsible from an IT perspective on whether somebody's going to be responsible enough to take their equipment home.
We
I
get-
take mine home every night. I
yeah,
mean, it's just,
we get notification on a regular basis on, through Public Works or through Ted Martin or whatever, on the imminence of any kind of storm or anything like that. It would have to be just inculcated in folks that, hey, you got a storm coming up, you got notification of it, take your laptop home.
Okay, I think if you're doing something like that, it needs to be like a citywide, because you do alerts, right? Or you can send out emails and say there's a possibility that you will be working from home. And then I also think that we just need to be conscious of the fact that there may be some people that are exempt, but maybe have like small children, and what are expectations going to be for them if they're at home working, they have a baby because they can't get them to daycare? Are they going to be expected to take, a vacation day, or just doing the most that they can do in the situation that they're working in?
I hesitate to put things like that into policy simply because those are going to be one-off situations that I think would be best served by the employee talking with the supervisor.
Okay, all right, and that, I mean, that's kind of what I wanted to know, is how would it be handled on a case-by-case basis, and what that would look like? Because there may just be situations where people are unable to work from home because they've got 2 or 3 small children.
Right.
Jan, just to confirm, so a snow day, that counts as a paid day off for
It-
employees?
If
But it-
City Hall is closed, yes.
Okay, but it doesn't count against their sick days or paid time off?
No, sir.
Okay.
Not if the city administrator closes City Hall.
Okay. What if we possibly looked at making that an option and a choice for employees? So if they wanted to take that day as a paid day off, they could, or if they wanted to take it as no pay? Could that save the city a little bit of money there?
Yeah, in that respect, let's say, for example, it's snowing outside. The city administrator has not closed City Hall for whatever reason. An employee doesn't feel safe driving in because these hills around here, I've been on some of them that scare me to death.
Of course.
And so in that respect, always want to make sure the employee understands that if you feel unsafe, take the day off, stay at home, that kind of thing. And if you're not prepared to work from home from that day, okay, take the day off as a paid day off. Or if you want to take it unpaid, it's your option.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so just to clarify, Jan, so you're recommending that we vote and approve on these 4 items?
Yes, sir.
Is there any other discussion or questions before we vote on this? Hearing none, have a motion to approve?
I make the motion to approve the policy changes as written,
In Article 17.
Article 17.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Article 17 has been approved.
Thank you. All right. The last one that I want to talk about has to do, this one is a rule. And just for everybody's edification, articles have to be approved by the Board of Aldermen. Those are kind of the primary constructs of how employees are to interact and behave and things like that at the City of Branson. Rules are elaborations on specific articles. And so with this particular one, Rule 25, workers' compensation for on-the-job injuries or illnesses and returning to work. What we're doing with this is also, we want to just kind of clean it up, if you will. We're looking at doing things that align measures with what we have in respect to our IFF agreement and getting people back to work. We've had situations in the past where employees were put on light duty and were on light duty for more than a year. At that point, they were functionally just unable to do their job. So effectively what we're doing is we're coming up with some time limits on that with respect to what is allowed under FMLA, what is also allowed under ADA. Effectively, in that respect, 12 weeks for FMLA, and we give another consideration on a person-by-person basis based on the healthcare giving us advice on that situation, employing ADA. Because in a situation where if an employee could come back, say like they've been off for 12 weeks for whatever reason, then it gives them, if the doctor, the healthcare professional says, if you just need another 3 weeks and you'll be in good shape, then allowing that under ADA. So that's what the updates are going to be. And I've got Bob here Bob's our resident expert on FMLA and return to work and things like that.
Hello, Bob.
Good morning. Bob Smither, HR, Suite 315. So first, do you have any questions about what you've heard so far? So the establishing that time limit, that's 6 months for an employee who, it's very rare that we get beyond that point with an employee, but it can happen. It can happen with an orthopedic surgery that didn't go well, more therapy needed, and they find out with another picture that they'll take that maybe we need another surgery. So those are kind of one-offs. Those are rare. They happen maybe one in a year or every 2 years. Generally speaking, by the end of 6 months, a person's going to be able to go back to full duty. We've instituted on the fit for duty exams. Those are an extension of post-offer employment testing. It's not for every position. Right now, we've got them in place for fire and police, public safety, and also our public works and utilities employees, the maintenance workers. Those are our labor jobs. And the premise behind that in a post-offer employment test, during the offer of employment, that's a test that they go through. The test is designed by a physical therapy clinic based on, they come down here and do a job analysis of the job with employees in that position. And they go over, what do you do and how do you do it? And what things do you lift? And what things do you normally do about this and do about that? And they come up with a test that simulates the essential job functions that a person can go through. Part of that also allows the clinic to find out any previous work injuries. For example, they have a previous shoulder injury, and they measure all the musculoskeletal ranges of motion. So say an employee comes to us with a previous shoulder injury and his range of motion is 70% and not 100, they establish that baseline at the pre-employment stage. Doesn't mean they don't get hired, it just means if you hurt that shoulder again, you're done at 70% and not 100. Saves costs, saves medical costs, saves work comp payouts, saves money in the long run. Based on that test then, we can do a fit for duty exam, and that is another safety tool in our arsenal of safety. What that means is we can use that exam for someone who's been off work for 30 days, at least 30 days. We can have them go through that test, and it goes through all those essential functions to find out, you know what, they're good to go, they're in shape for this, we can do it. So the exam, when accomplished, they're either found capable or incapable by the clinic. That information gets supplied to the employer, not to the employee, only because, for example, one of the tests has 10 functions. Maybe they're not good on 1 or 2 of those. Hypothetically, somebody's coming off of a knee surgery, And the professional people at the clinic, they're experienced, they know what they're looking, and they know what they're seeing. They know when that person's favoring that knee in that particular, you have to lift this many pounds and carry it for 50 yards and set it back down and pick it up, or you've got to do this many steps, or you've got to go up this ladder. They can see if somebody's favoring that knee after an injury, and maybe they're found not capable. Well, the employer can take that information, get with the department, and go, okay, well, they say incapable, but it was this item right here and this item right here. Can we accommodate that until they are in shape for that and keep them off of those things? Or do we say, no, we're going to keep you on modified duty until you're up to speed, and we'll schedule another one of these. You're found capable, you're good to go. So in some instances, it's been found to save the employee from themselves. In other instances, it can say, no, you're good. You can stop complaining. You're fully capable. So let's go on, let's get on with it. So in both of those instances, it, say the knee injury. Maybe it's a firefighter. Surgeon says, this guy's good to go. We do a fit for duty exam. We find out that they're still favoring that knee. It's not quite there yet. Don't get on that truck and jump off and blow that knee right out again. Yeah. And that's what that's for. Now, maybe it's an office employee, and they don't need to be doing that. Sure. Well, you got a sedentary job. Yeah, you're back to work. No problem. And so that's why the employer gets the information and not the employee, because the employee thinks they're entitled to that, and I need to know what you're looking for because I can fix it right here, right now. Well, no, we're saving you from yourself. And I'd rather have those employees than the others, so.
Bob, what's the trigger in this? Is the doctor's release or restrictions?
Yes.
The trigger? Okay.
There's two different avenues. One, somebody comes off a surgery. The doctor says, guy's good to go. Okay, then in that instance, we get a form from the physical therapy clinic. The doctor signs off and says, hey, by the way, this person's going to do a fit for duty exam. It's going to do all these things right here. Are you okay with that? Doctor has to sign off on that. Then we do it. The other one, if it's not a surgery, and this goes for either work-related or not work-related, for these particular positions, just to make sure that they're safe to go back to full duty. So again, if it's a surgeon, we actually had a surgeon clear an employee 1 week after a knee surgery.
Oh, boy.
Wow.
And fortunately for that position, we had a fit for duty exam, and it was found, no, you're not ready yet. Well, the doc says I am. You're not ready
That's
yet.
what I was trying to get to, how you cover the city. There's these additional tests. It's called CYA
Right.
for a reason.
Well, yeah. And it's actually helps the employee. Again, sometimes it saves them from themselves. I can do this, I will do it. I don't want to be off work. I don't want to do out of modified duty. I can do this. And then they blow that knee back out or shoulder or whatever it is.
I got you.
And it keeps them from doing that, keeps us from spending more money, keeps the work comp claims down, and in the long run, hopefully save money on our premiums as well.
Any questions for Bob? Thank you very much, Bob.
Thanks.
So procedurally, Jan, I know we vote and approve on amendments or articles. This is a rule. So procedurally, do we vote and approve on a rule? You want a general consensus? What do we do for a rule?
I would entertain that you just have a vote that recommends that the city administrator incorporate this as a rule.
I will accept that motion.
So move.
Did I make?
Second?
I don't think that came across. I made the.
Bill made the motion, Stan seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. We are now down to reports.
Mayor, the only thing I have to report is I just want to talk about, we finished up this past Friday our open enrollment for benefits. We used American Fidelity again for our open enrollment process. The platform that they use, they give to us. That's our benefit of using American Fidelity for our short-term disability, our cancer policies, our things like that. Those different policies that employees can choose or not choose. It's up to the employee. There's not a hard sell on those. But we get that platform for enrollment at no cost, and then those platforms that platform then communicates to all of our carriers, and that's all synced up behind the scenes. Kimberly works closely with all the entities, and we make sure that we have it done flawlessly before January 1st of every year. By and large, the feedback we got was positive. Now, we did have an occasional, hey, I didn't find out about this, but then again, we had an employee or two that would send HR emails to spam, and that's kind of hard to get those kind of emails. But, and we had a couple where people wanted to be able to enroll on their phones, and the functionality of that just isn't conducive. But again, we do meet with American Fidelity representatives, and I just wanted to clarify when it comes to that. Some people say, well, I just want the same policy, everything else the same I had the year before. The issue falls under the fact that what if something terrible happens and you didn't elect a particular policy? Frankly, that becomes a liability for the city of Branson, and that's the part of what American Fidelity does, is by requiring all employees and all those on our plan meet with them, that eliminates that liability that you didn't know. And so we're covering our bases in that respect. So, but the American Fidelity's customer service has been top-notch. They've done a great job for us all up and down the line, and we're looking forward to having that same team with us next year.
Well, I'll tell you, my personal experience, they were extremely friendly, they were knowledgeable, helpful. The time didn't take very long because they had all the answers right there. So my personal experience, I thought it was kudos for sure.
Well, and I gotta say, Kimberly does a lot of work getting this set up to make sure it's done correctly. She's dotting those T's and crossing those I's, so.
I think you meant dotting the i's and crossing the t's.
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't? I stand corrected. Any comments from the committee? Thank you. Is there any other reports?
No other reports, Mayor.
So I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. For the record, it is 10:27. Might be a record-breaking HR meeting.
Merry Christmas to all.
Yeah,
Thank you
Merry
all.
Christmas.